Okay, so I've got 3ds Max open, and just make sure if you start the program and you're given a choice of the different options between classic and design, I don't have them here, but you may see it the first time you run the program, always choose design, and you'll only have that option the first time you run the program, so I can't show that to you. Yeah, and you'll also see when you first start the program every time, it will give you a list of templates to choose from. That'll look a little bit different to this, but you will see these same templates. And so to start with the setup I have there, you can just double click on that original startup with default in brackets. And that's essentially what I've done. And then if you want to again go back to that starting point, you can go to the main menu and choose reset anytime, just to clear everything and begin again. Okay, so all I wanted to do initially is show you some of the basic options that you have for creating objects and point out the different parts of the interface. So you've got the menus at the top, unlike a lot of Autodesk programs where they're phasing out menus, you still have them in Max, which is actually a good thing, I think. And the toolbars down below, so I'll come back to that in a minute. But then you also have over on the right here, we'll ignore these tabs for now, and then just look at that section on the right which has a group of tabs within it. And that's probably the most important part of the interface that you may not be used to in other programs. It's called the command panel. And it has there, you can see the create tab, the first one, open by default. And then the second tab there is modify. And those two are probably the ones you're going to work with most initially. So if you're familiar with AutoCAD, the create tab is like your draw menu in a way. And then the modify tab is like your edit or your modify menu in AutoCAD. So when you go to create, you'll see that you have different options within that to create different kinds of objects. But I'm just going to start on that first one, which is geometry. And then you'll see that I have below that even more options for different kinds of objects. But again, I'm just going to leave it on the first option, which is standard primitives. And they're some of the most common objects you'll create, things like boxes, spheres, and cones. Right, so to create something like a box, click on the box tool. And the creation process is very similar for all of these objects. You generally click and drag to create the base, then release to set the size of that. So notice how, if you didn't see, I clicked to set the first corner and then moved the cursor to where I wanted the second corner before releasing the left mouse button. Now as I move the cursor up, it's going to set a height, and then I can click when I'm happy with that. So I've set a diagonal base and then a height. So I'll just do that one more time. So with the box tool still on, it stays on until you cancel it. Clicking and dragging to set the base, release, and then move the cursor and click again to set the height. Like I said, many of these options, or so these tools are very similar. So if I go to the cone tool, I can click and drag, this time to set or draw a circle for the base, starting from the center. When I release the left mouse button, it'll set the radius. Then I can move the cursor up to set a height, click when I'm happy, but now I can move the cursor yet again to set a radius for the top. So if I bring that all the way in, it'll be a point and a true cone, otherwise I can make that a tapering cylinder. Alright, so some of them you don't need to have as many options. So with a sphere, all you need to do is click and drag and then release to set the radius. Some things have more options. So if we go to a extended primitive, you'll see that things like a chamfer box, again, begin with the same process as a box, clicking and dragging to set the base. Release to set the diagonally opposite corner. Move the cursor to set the height. Click to fix that, and then now I need to move the cursor again to set a radius. because this box has a chamfered or a rounded edge. So click and drag, and then release to set the base, and then move the cursor, and you should see a height coming up, and then click to set that when you're happy with it. Oh, yeah. Oh, of course, yeah. So orbiting's the same as Revit. So I'll just bring a few things back, except that it's Alt. So if you hold down Alt and the middle mouse button, it orbits just like Revit does. Okay, so I've just deleted everything. There's no delete tool. You just use the delete key on your keyboard. So I've deleted everything. I'm going to start again, back to standard primitives, and I'm going to click on the box tool. And then, again, click and drag to set the base of my box, and then move the cursor up to set a height, and click to fix that. Now, you'll see that most people who are experienced with the program won't be too fussy about the way or the size of the things they create when they first are making them. They just want to get them into the scene and then adjust the size after that. And that's the standard creation process with Max. So over here in properties now, you can see, or on the create panel, you can see that I've got a length and a width, and also a height. Now, if you've lost that, you can see if I click on this now, and by the way, I'm just right-clicking to cancel. You can always right-click, and that'll get you out of any tool. So here on the box tool, if I right-click, it takes me out of it. If I select that box again, the properties won't come up in that panel, because that's your create panel for making new objects. To see the properties now, I've got to go to the modify panel, which is the second tab there. So like I said, they're the two tabs you'll be using most. Create panel to make things, modify panel to change them. Alright, so I'm just going to spend a little bit of time looking at these properties. And so, do any of you know the size of your tile? Or some of the suggested sizes? Yep. That's, yeah, 500 by 500, yeah. But 18D, I'd start with the smaller one and then try some bigger ones later. So I'm going to start with that. So 500, I'm going to type in for, well, I'm just going to type it in for all of them. 500 for the length, 500 for the width, and then 500 for the height. And I've got a cube. I just zoom with the wheel. So just, and you might need to check your unit, so I didn't look at that. So if you go to the Customize menu, so up the top you'll have Customize, and then Unit Setup. And you need to just check that display units there is on metric and then millimetres. Yeah, that's probably why, if it's not visible. Yeah. Yep, so you can just select it and then type in 500 millimetres for those three things, and it should become smaller. Okay, so that's 500 in all three directions, but we want a tile that's maybe not as deep in one direction, so it's flatter. And I'll just show you some different ways of adjusting these properties. You can obviously type in a number, but a common way of adjusting any of these values where you see the up and down arrows at the end is just to click and drag on that field. So if you click and drag there, notice how I'm holding the left mouse button down, and graphically or visually I can see the change in that property. So I'm on the length property and I'm just clicking and dragging over those up and down arrows. So that's called a spinner, and you can drag those spinners to graphically or intuitively adjust any property where you see those up and down arrows. Right, so that's a really good way of just getting a feel graphically or visually for the size it should be. Now, you probably know a tile is even less than that. In reality, it's probably about 20 mil at most, but maybe even 15 or something like that. But I'm going to make it 20, just because 15 is a little bit thin. And so that's a fairly thick tile, but you can get them that thick. They can definitely go up to 30, varies a lot, but 15 is actually common as well. So you can play around with those sizes by typing in a value, but of course, don't be afraid to just visually get some sort of cue as well. On the Modify tab, the second tab. So in your command panel. Yep. Okay, so a box might seem like a simple thing, but you'd be amazed how many really complex models begin life as a box. I'd say everything I've just shown you in those different images and animations, probably 90% of the models there, even the complex things like the cars and other things, would have began as a box. And you can turn it into almost anything in Max. So it's one of the important skills you need to have, just to be able to create a box, get the properties in there, and then modify it further. And it's actually called box modelling for that reason, one of the main modelling techniques. And we'll take you through that gradually over the next few weeks. For now though, I'm going to just show you how to get a material onto this, to show you straight away something that you just could not do very easily in Revit. So I'm going to bring up the material editor. So you'll see up on the toolbar, you have a button that looks like a sphere with a checker pattern. Okay, you can click on it again if you want to hide the material editor. So just make sure you know where that button is. It should be next to the group of teapot buttons, which are all for rendering. Okay, so the material editor is one of the most important tools that you use in the program. M is the shortcut. And you'll see initially it'll probably come up with this slate material editor, which is a complex modern interface that they have for this material editor in Max. You can go to the modes menu and change that to compact material editor. And that gives you the traditional editor, which is a much better one to start with. So make sure you know that, modes, and you can easily switch back to slate if you want to later. So the modes menu in the top left corner, and you should then be able to choose slate. I mean, choose compact, don't choose slate. Okay, so we've got some materials there, and actually yours, oh, that's good. So some of you have got the, yeah, you've gone for the classic. Oh, someone's gone for classic on your machine. Right. Okay, so you'll need to change that. Well, we'll fix that later, but it won't affect what you're doing now. But you'll have to fix that before you do the next thing. So yeah, so it's all to do with that startup. There's a bunch of startup settings that determine how your materials will come in. So you'll need to restart the program to fix that. But again, it won't affect what you're doing now, so that's okay. And then you've got also, if you notice, yours are a bit lighter than mine. That's to do with another setting. And I'm just going to change mine to match yours. There we go. So notice how now mine are a bit lighter. So just let me know if yours are dark, like mine just were. It's a very subtle thing, and you'll pick up on these things as you use the program more. So see how mine have got that sort of dark tinge. Okay, so let me know if you've got that. You probably won't. You should have it usually like that. Okay, but again, don't worry if you don't see all these pre-made materials, because I'm going to show you how to make a material from scratch. Okay, so these are all different slots. Just choose any slot. Maybe leave it on the first one even. And then, just in case you don't have Arc and Design here, I'm just going to show you how to set that. So you'll see there's a button that's next to your material name. Your material name is probably going to be 01 default. And then next to that, you'll see the Arc and Design button. or it might be another one. If it's another one, don't worry, just click on that button and then make sure you have the mental array panel expanded, and you should see Arc and Design is the first option there. Now if you don't see that, okay, so those people who don't see it, I'll show you what to do. Okay, so go to Rendering. This is only if you don't see Arc and Design. Rendering, and then go to Render Setup. So it should be fourth in the list on the rendering menu. And then where it says Renderer, the third option, just make sure it says NVIDIA Mental Array. And then you can close that. So then back in your material editor, do the same thing, click on that button, and then you should see Arc and Design under Mental Array. So the second group there will be Mental Array, and you should see Arc and Design as the first one there. So that's working, yeah, good. So double click on Arc and Design, just to make sure we're all starting with the same material. Right, so these, believe it or not, are what you've been using in Revit. Revit uses Arc and Design materials exclusively. They started life in 3ds Max many years ago, and then they just brought them over into Revit in a kind of abbreviated form. So that's what we'll use initially. Okay, so we want to put this onto the box. It's really simple. Drag the sphere onto the box, and you'll see it change colour. That easy. Now we want to make this into a tile. Right, so you do that down, you'll see below the name and everything else, there's a diffuse area. And before we put the tile on, I'll just show you how to change the colour. It's really easy. Just click on that colour swatch. And you've got there a colour selector, a bit like Photoshop. You can choose any colour you want there, and you'll see it change straight away in your viewport. Yeah, diffuse, so make sure there are a few different colour swatches, so it's the first one. Okay, so play around with some different colours. It's all going to get covered by the image in a second anyway, so don't worry about the colour you choose, doesn't matter. Okay, so... Oh, yeah, you're clicking on the box, just click on the actual colour. Yeah, so... close that browser, yeah, and then you should be able to click on the colour. Yeah. Okay, so now basically we're going to make a ceramic material. So I'm going to click on that list above where it says select a template, and then go to ceramic in the list there, glazed ceramic, sorry, under finishes. So don't choose glazed ceramic tiles, make sure it's just glazed ceramic. And you'll see then it'll go back to being a grey, but with the shininess of ceramic. You can double click if you want to make it give you a bigger preview. Double click on the sphere. And if you want to see a background so that you can see reflections, just click on the checkerboard pattern over on the right hand side. You'll see a list of buttons. It's the third button from the top, which will just give you a background to reflect in the material. So that's a fairly shiny tile. We'll just leave it on that for now. Okay, so I've got my basic ceramic set up. I could go now and change the colour again and see what happens now with the shiny material. But what we really want to do is put an image in here. So that's the colour swatch, obviously, that we've been clicking on. Next to that, the one that Beck clicked on is the right one you want to use now. That button will bring up the material map browser. So, you know, in Revit, when you put in an image for a material like brickwork or timber, something like that, this is the same thing, but you've got a lot more options in Max. Gives you much greater possibilities. So again, clicking on that button, you can always close this if you don't want to use it, but this time we do. So I'm going to click on that button, and then the first option there is the one you probably use the most, Bitmap. So simply double click on that, and it will ask you to choose an image file. Now you can browse here to the P drive, go to Interior Design, EDUDC Interior Design, I'm sure you're all used to that, and then scroll down and you'll find a Material Image folder, Material Images, and then here I've got a ton of image files for you to use. You can change the view to medium icons or large icons if you prefer, and then when you scroll down you'll be able to see what they look like. So these are all images set up to be used for materials. So you can choose anything you like. Anything you think will look good as a tile. So have you got Bitmap? Oh yeah, so just up there, so when you're browsing, go to the P drive, Student Resources, and then EDUDC Interior Design, and then Material Images. Okay, so you'll see there are literally hundreds, probably actually thousands of files in there, which you need when you're choosing through materials. There are lots of options. So I won't use this in the end, but I was going to choose something that's got a bit of a pattern. I've got one in mind that I'm going to use later, but let's just find something a bit different.
So if I have like a curved shape object, the material molds like that?
Ah, yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That's a good question. Yeah, it does. That's one of the things that you'll get in Max that you don't get in Revit, the ability to set it to any 3D form you like. Yeah. So if you think about what you see in movies where they've got, really detailed characters and creatures modelled in 3D and the textures follow those forms exactly, you've got that level of control because this is the software they use. A lot of that. So here, I'm going to go for something interesting. I'm going to do this metal rust. Or no, I'll do this. No, sorry, that's a bad example just because I want you to see the edges. I'm going to do something like that in the end, but let's go for something like this where you can see the shape, just so you've got a clear idea what this is doing. So, okay, so I've got an image. Now, I can't see it up here yet, partly because this option's on, use real-world map scale. So turn that off, and so bring this up. There's my image. Now the reflections are making it a bit hard to see, but it is there. Also in the box, notice we've got, so you have to select the box, and you'll see then that real world map size is an option for the box as well. You've got to turn that off as well. For something like a tile, you would always turn those things off. So real world map size, if you're wondering what that does, that basically makes it work like Revit. So in Revit, all the materials are mapped that way. So you set a size, like in this case 25mm, for that image to be. So this image will always be that size, no matter what. The problem when you're using that option is if you're doing something like a tile, because you don't want the image to be a fixed size, you want the image to be the size of your tile. No matter what size the tile is, you want the image just to follow that. And when the tile is repeated, we want the image to follow the tile, not to be repeating itself based on that size that you've put in. So this is something you can only do in Max that you can't do in Revit. Okay, now to see the image on the on our box, there's a button up the top. You might need to look for it a little bit, but it's got a checker pattern again, with a light bulb on it. Turn that on, and you should see your image then perfectly fitting onto your box. If you don't, just make sure you've got both those options turned off. So there are two. There's one in the material, use real world map scale, and then one in the box, real world map size. All right, they're slightly different. So it fits perfectly. And that's in the box. So you've got to select the box, and then in the modify panel you'll see that option, the last one. Okay, so how much easier is that if you've ever tried to get a repeating image onto an object in Revit? Has anyone ever tried that? So have you ever tried to have a decal appear on, say, a piece of furniture or something in an exact location and then have it stay on that same object, and when you copy the object, stay in the same spot? It's very difficult in Revit, unless you use a decal, and then decals can only go in certain places. In Max, though, you've always got that level of control. So now, what I can do is copy this across. Now, copying is really easy. The only thing that is hard is that you won't see a copy button. It's because there isn't one. All you do is use Shift. Use Shift. So I've selected my box, and I'm going to right-click and choose Move. Now, you'll see there's a Move button up on the toolbar that does the same thing. So either way, once you've chosen Move, probably the easiest way is just to right-click and choose Move. You'll see there's an XYZ gizmo that comes up, and then you can just hold down Shift and then click and drag on the X-axis, and it'll copy. And notice the image stays in exactly the same spot on that tile. So you can copy that as many times as you want. If you want to go up, click and drag on the Z-axis. Now, if you're wondering whether you can do it accurately, of course you can. But think about it as a modelling program, the way you model things in real life. So you don't always need to measure things exactly, and you can just do it by eye, and often that's good enough. So I'll hold down Shift, and then click and drag on the X arrow, just where it's red at the end, and then let go of Shift. So you'll get some options. Just do instance when you ask what type of copy or clone. Okay, so I've got my tile. Now I want to try a different image. So I'm going, that material images folder is big, if you want to copy it, you'll need a hard drive, So, okay, so if you go back into your material editor, you should see down the bottom, there's a bitmap option where it has a path. And you can simply click on that and change it to something else. Hopefully, yeah. That's the idea, so... Okay, so here's something that I might actually want. So I might want that as my image. And it could be an interesting one to try with different mirroring. So the idea here is I might want that to make a graphic pattern with these tiles combined. Oh, undo. Just, on the quick access toolbar at the top, you can just undo. Left arrow. So the final thing I'll show you before starting you off on that tutorial is the mirror button in Max is the same icon as you have in Revit and AutoCAD. It's the mirror at the top. You can see next to the Align button. So I've just got one box selected. I'm going to click on Mirror, and then you'll see there you've got, unlike those other programs, options for each axis. X, Y, and Z. So it's full 3D mirror. So I'm going to choose Z. You can see that's going up and down. I don't want that. So I'm going to try Y. Well, you can see that's not doing a lot because it's mirroring backwards and forwards, and that won't make a change. But if I go to one of these, you can see then it is making a change. Okay, so transform and geometry you can see works slightly differently. It's going to do one other thing first though, so I'm going to cancel that and show you, sorry, one last little option, just so if you do want to mirror vertically, I'm going to change the pivot. So when you make a box at first, you'll see the gizmo on the base. This is maybe a little bit advanced, but just in case you want to try mirroring things up and down. Let's just do it this way with a few quick shortcuts. So on the hierarchy tab, you can go to Effect Pivot Only, and then Center to Object. And then turn Effect Pivot Only off. So that just does it in 2 clicks. And now if I go and mirror again, this time if I choose Z, you can see now it's mirroring from the center, not from the base, from the vertical center. So that should make it just a bit easier to experiment with these different options. And so you can see then what these all do. So in this case, if I want to mirror left and right, it's X, Y. If I want to mirror up and down, it's either Y, Z or X, Z or ZX. So that might be what I'm after, and I can do that for all of these if I wanted. Yeah. So I know it will change all 6 of them. So you'd need to make a new material to just change one. Well, I'll show you. So okay, I'll do it just the one. Okay, so I'll just change this, and then okay. So say I just want to change one. It's a few steps. You'd need to right-click, select the one you want to change, and then in Modify panel, right-click on the one that says Box, on the bit where it says Box in that panel, and then choose Make Unique. Then in the material editor, drag your material across to another slot. Give it a new name. So just call it new, whatever you like, new tile. Drag it onto the box that you want to be different. And then to change the image, you click on that M, the button that now says M, and then just go down and change the image to something else. So yeah, I decided I want to try something different, so I'm going to just choose that, and there we are. Yeah, but yeah. So I did want to show you one other thing actually, and that is how to get a relief pattern. So these are just flat, and that's probably something to think about. You could get a really good design just using different graphics or different graphic images, but you may be planning on doing a relief. So I'll just do some other things. This is probably a little bit more advanced than what you need to do straight away, but I'm going to add in some segments, and I'll just do it to one. So again, I'm going to select this one on the top left, right click where it says Box, go to Make Unique, otherwise that'll all change. And I'm going to add in segments. So here I'm adding in 60 segments for length and, sorry, not for length, sorry, for width and height. Which my shortcuts aren't working for. That's interesting. Okay, so let's just go to wireframe up here so you can see I've basically added in a lot of extra detail to that one box. Again, you don't have to do this, but just something to think about if you want to try a tile with some depth. This is the sort of thing you'll have to do. So I'm going to go now and put on what's called a displace modifier, and then go and get a bitmap image. and it is here, the one I want to use. That's it. And make sure it's facing the right way. Yep. Okay, so I'm just going to scale that up. I'm just doing this fairly roughly so you get the basic idea. And now, I don't know, my shortcuts aren't working. Okay, so now I should be able to displace that, and I'll put a simpler image on. So I've got a plain tile, but it should now get some depth based on the image that I've just chosen. So I'll show you the image. Okay, so using that black and white image, I've now got a relief pattern. Oops, too many folders open. Got a relief pattern in 3D. So you don't always have to model complex geometry. For things like tiles, you can use images to generate the modelling. So that's another thing to think about. Obviously, there are a few options there you'll need to know about to achieve that effect. But yeah, it's amazing what you can do when you work with things like displacement. So it could even just be a subtle relief like that. You've got total control over it, max. Alrighty, so yeah, just some things to think about. Might give you some ideas how you can use a 3D program to help you with your tile design. And so next week I'll give you some examples, maybe showing you how you can use 3D modelling for the second part of that assignment, doing your spatial 3D units as well. I'll finish the video there. Unless anyone's got any questions about that? Or no? All good? Yep, okay.